Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Monday, March 12th Education Committee and Supplementary Regular Board Meeting. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Copeland.
Thank you, Dr. Gilbert. Welcome, everyone. We've got, we were going to have 3 presentations tonight, but it's getting a little sleety and wet and nasty out there, so we're going to cut Dr. Eveslag's presentation on the Every Student Succeeds Act. You know, I, for one, have seen the presentation, and it was a barn burner, and those of you who are making fun are going to be sorry for what you missed, but we will do that perhaps at the regular business board meeting. So I'm going to ask the staff to talk about the Writing Fellowship Program, which is in its newness this year. Dr. Pratt and some staff did a lot of investigating over the course of last year and initiated this program this year. And so I'm not going to go into too much detail. Let them start. Dr. Eveslag, who am I turning this over to? Ms. Marcuson.
I think so. The blue button here.
Just turn it on for you.
Thank you.
All right, now you got the blue button.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. My name is Lauren Marcuson. I'm an assistant principal at Harriton High School. The Writing Fellowship was developed as a joint endeavor between Lower Merion and Harriton High School to promote and assume a student-driven approach in developing a more robust community of writers. With us today, we have Dr. Pratt, who obviously is our curriculum supervisor of the humanities, Diane Shannon from Lower Merion High School, who is a reading specialist, Brian Mays, who is the English department chair at Lower Merion High School. Ms. Lindy Vanderquast runs the program at Harriton High School. She is a gifted teacher, and our English department chair at Harriton High School is Ms. Nicole Donzi. So in addition to starting the fellowship to promote the student-driven efforts, it's really about promoting strong kids who are strong writers, making them better writers, and providing them with the tools they need to be tutors. So you have this nice coalescence of all those skills. We've already seen growth between this year and next year. We already have had the application process. If you look at the slide, you'll see that next year we double in size, as does Lower Merion High School. How does the, excuse me, my apologies. Before we go to the next slide, which will be Diane, I'd like to speak a little bit about the fact that it's an opportunity for the students when they're working with the tutee, as we will call it, on their writing, to develop their own skills as well. What happens is that they have the opportunity not only to assist those students, but then take the thesis statement that they may be working on with that student and say, I have an English paper due myself. This is something that allows them to reflect on their own craft and develop those skills within themselves as well. To that end, we have an opportunity for the tutors to work with Ms. Shannon and Ms. Vanderquast on their own writing as well as assist. And I will turn it over now to Ms. Shannon to talk more about that in detail.
Thank you. I'm just going to describe what happens during a typical week for the Writing Fellows. For 3 days out of the 4-day cycle, the Fellows tutor any student who desires some help with their work. For the most part, tutoring takes place in the Learning Center in each school. However, there are times when teachers invite us into their lunch and learns, so we go directly to the teachers' rooms and work with students there. Lately, we've been working with writers in the school on their history research paper. We've also helped students in AP classrooms with revising drafts. On the 4th day of the cycle, which is the D-Day, that's when we hold our workshops. So every 4 days we have a workshop in which students develop their own writing skills, the tutors, the fellows, develop their own writing skills, and also help understand better how it is to help their fellow writers. So for the most part, we work with developing skills in writing in the social sciences. We also work on literary analysis, or we can work on something as specific as the synthesis paper in the workshop. The students, the fellows, have been developing their skills personally developing their own writing skills and developing their skills and helping others since before school began. Beth Gephardt, who is a University of Pennsylvania professor, came to meet with all of the fellows in August. She will revisit us this week and next as a follow-up for a workshop. The premise for our work as writing fellows is to develop writers, help them develop their own writing skills. So we don't instruct necessarily, we facilitate. Our approach is the facilitative approach in that we use questions, the fellows use questions to elicit the best responses, the best writing in their fellow students' work. There's a hierarchy needs in that the fellows look at the paper in general, looking at thesis statement and overall structure. We also help them with things like grammar and revision, but for the most part, we're helping them with their overall approach, their overall thesis or structure. The resources that we have been using this year, the primary resource is They Say, I Say by Birkenstein and Graff. It is an approach that has been used in other programs, other fellowship programs, where you learn to interact with your writing text. At this point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Brian Nees.
So we looked at a variety of models for our writing center, and in particular, we're focused on adapting the collegiate model to Lower Merion High School and Harriton High School. We looked at Temple University, we looked at Villanova, and we looked at Bryn Mawr and Haverford as well, and we even went to Temple University as a site visit to get a sense of how they structured their writing center. It was student-based, which feeds directly into the strategic plan, and so we looked at ways to get that at our high school. We also looked at Plymouth Whitemarsh High School, which has a student-based writing center, and so that's the model that we're using to develop our own writing center here. One of the things that we are working on with the fellowship is providing training both in writing itself, so the 5 domains of focus, content, organization, style, and conventions, giving our tutors that kind of writing support, but then also giving them training in how to provide that support to their fellow students. What we're looking for in the future is how to shift the culture around writing, that it is not something that is an act between the writer and the teacher and an isolated act in that sense. It is something ongoing, and students need to see themselves as writers. So one of the ways that we're considering doing that is offering more opportunities for creative writing, more opportunities for student submissions, looking at local publication venues, creating some contests that students can submit to again, build the culture around writing, not just as an act for a particular class. Another thing that we're looking to do is get students more involved in the Writing Center itself. So right now, we've had some success with working on revisions of drafts. Teachers have met with Ms. Shannon and Ms. Vanderkwas about getting additional feedback for revisions, but we want students to see the Writing Center as something that can help in all stages of writing, formulating ideas, drafting, outlining, organizing thoughts, certainly revising and finalizing the drafts, but looking again at all stages of the writing. And so this is going to require a couple of logistical changes, and so Dr. Pratt is here to talk about the logistics.
So to move this work forward, we wanted to take a moment and just explain some of the logistics in terms of underlying support. So in terms of the facilitators for the Writing Fellowship, we currently have 2 district teachers who devote one of 15 teaching periods to facilitating, both supporting the fellows as well as overseeing the tutoring that's happening during the Writing Center. And those 2 facilitators are Ms. Shannon at Lower Merion and Ms. Vanderkwas. I also wanted to share with you the location for this work. So in each of the high schools, we have learning centers, and the learning centers have faculty members available for students to consult with during lunch and learn and throughout the academic day. In addition to having access to content area teachers, students now have access to a peer tutor in that same space. The Writing Fellows will also visit classrooms, especially during Lunch and Learn and by invitation and at the request of a teacher during peer tutoring sessions, during moments where it's worthwhile to have another set of eyes on students' papers. So those are some of the logistics in terms of how the fellowship works. What we also wanted to share with you is how do we know this is working? So we put a program in place. What are the gauges so that we can systematically evaluate the success and or reevaluate the places where we might want to tighten or improve? And so success for the Writing Fellowship is gauged with two different measures. One is a quantitative metric. So we are keeping track of the number of students who come in to meet with a fellow over the course of the year. And to date, between mid-October and mid-January, we had over 150 students who came in to visit a fellow during time in the Learning Center. And so knowing that baseline number, we're interested in, does that number increase, especially as students become more accustomed to the Writing Center culture? The second measure, and in some ways we think it's an even more important measure, is the qualitative metric. And this one is a little bit harder to capture, but we feel it's really important because it's central to the premise of the fellowship. And that is this longer-term cultural shift in how we think about writing. And so we'd really like to see evidence of students seeing themselves as writers rather than as students of writing. And that may seem like mere semantics, but it's a really important shift in how students think about themselves and their work. We want writers to discuss pieces during ideation and revision stages. As we work with writers, especially in high school, and even writers early in college, oftentimes the Writing Center becomes a place to bring a paper when the paper is almost complete. Instead, we're asking for this culture of writing and the Writing Fellowship and the Writing Center to be a place where, yes, you can bring your writing when you need another set of eyes or when you're thinking about the revision process. But even more importantly, we want it to be a space where you can ideate. And that idea of student-driven learning and student-driven voice, as Mr. Mays pointed out, is really in line with our strategic plan. We would like to see shifts from writing as dutiful task to writing as a desire to share ideas. That we think of students who envision themselves as writers, they have ideas that they want to share, not just assignments that they want to complete. And we want writers who use the language of the writing domains, who use that language around focus, content, organization, style, and conventions, not because it's the language that you see on a rubric, but it's the language of the discipline that writers use to be reflective on their own work and to guide both their own writing process as well as the writing of other people. So in light of that, that is the information we wanted to share with you about the Writing Fellowship Program, and also to take this opportunity to thank you for your support in building this really wonderful opportunity for students.
So, well, first of all, thank you very much for the presentation. It's really exciting because I remember when Mr. Copeland came back from some meetings with, I think, former high school alums.
With alumni.
Who said, you know, they really wanted more opportunity to write, and there was a lot of discussion about, you know, how to get that going. And there was a lot of discussion about how to do that within the strategic plan and make it student-centered. And I think this is a really great example of something that's come out of both, you know, listening to students and what they need and what they really feel is important for their education, and then, you know, working with them to figure out a way that they can kind of own their own knowledge production. So I think it's really, really fantastic. So, you know.
And we've increased the amount of rigor, particularly around research, writing, and papers. And when you increase rigor, we try and increase support for students at the same time. I give them credit. I sent them out on a mission to develop a program based around adults providing students with and I thought, frankly, it was a very good idea. They apparently didn't think it was a very good idea. And they went out and they came up with a program that was about peers helping peers. And so you learn as an administrator, when the staff gets excited about something, maybe you ought to step back and give them credit for maybe thinking of something differently and better than you have. And they've done that. So when I asked for an update, I was frankly, looking to say, see, I told you, you should have done it my way. And it turns out that they were able to be very successful doing it their way. So, please.
Well, I'm glad to see that. I do have one question just before I open up for everybody else, because it goes back to the logistics. So the students who are fellows of the program, so are they doing this during their freeze as well? I mean, because it sounds like it's happening all day long, not just during lunch and learn. So I'm just curious, you have students giving up freeze to do this? I'm very impressed.
So we have students who are giving up free periods to do this.
shouldn't say
We
giving
have
up, but,
students who
yeah.
are primarily working during lunch and learn. And so the structure that Ms. Shannon described, I think really aptly captures what happens. So once a week, typically during a D-Day, during one of their lunches, during either lunch 1 or lunch 2, all the fellows meet, because they're also forming a writing community between and amongst themselves. That's part of the reason why students are interested in doing this work, that not only are they helping their peers, they're also getting connected to a whole group of other students who are interested in becoming better writers and who are honing their own craft in writing. So during those D-Day meetings, there are 2 things that happen. One, students engage in writing to help themselves become better writers. So creative writing exercises or techniques for them to try on their own, or ways to brainstorm their current writing assignments amongst themselves. And they also practice tutoring strategies. So each time they meet, they will gain another strategy for how to tackle a challenging question related to focus, or how to guide a discussion in the hierarchy of skills. So if somebody comes in with their paper and says, help me fix all the commas in this paper, and you look at the paper as a fellow and you say, this paper might benefit from me really understanding what you're trying to argue. How do you shift that conversation between the concreteness of fix my commas to what are the ideas, and how do you do that in ways that open up rather than close down conversations? And students are doing all of this during their available periods during lunch and learn. So it's really wonderful. And students are using this same block of time to try to plan writing contests and try to invite other people to come in and talk about their writing. So the writing fellows are very invested.
That's great. Thank you. I'll open it up now. David?
Thanks for the presentation. I was wondering if you could just explain a little bit how one becomes a fellow.
So, wonderful question. So, fellows are selected through a 3-step process. So, the first thing that happens is there are teacher recommendations. And so, we will solicit recommendations from across the faculty, looking for students who are demonstrably strong writers, as well as who demonstrate leadership or leadership capacity. And those students who are recommended by teachers are then sent a letter and invited to apply to become a fellow. Some of those students take up the invitation, apply to become a fellow, and the application process includes them submitting one piece of graded academic writing, as well as an ancillary piece of writing, and a statement of intent for why they would like to be a fellow. Those applications are then looked at by the leadership team, which is this group here plus Lindy Vanderkwas. And one of the things that we look for is strong writing skills, as well as alignment with the vision of being a writing fellow. So if someone's application says, I can't wait to be a fellow because I love marking up somebody's paper, that's not a particularly good fit for the fellowship. And so after we read through the applications, we then send out an invitation to become a fellow. So those formal fellowship invitations were just sent out last week.
Is it limited to any particular grade? Are they all juniors and seniors, or just seniors, or
So The recommendation is for upperclassmen. So the recommendation is for rising juniors and seniors. There have been a very small number of current sophomore students who have been recommended. So, but it's primarily upperclassmen, juniors, and seniors.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Just to piggyback on the qualitative metric, are we getting any feedback from teachers about the improvement in the quality of the writing that they're getting in their classrooms? Like, are we hearing anything about whether we're seeing it, not only in terms of participation, but are the kids writing better in class?
So one of the things that Mr. Mays had talked about in our previous presentation was his experience as a teacher as well as a department chair. And so we have some anecdotal information about the potential impact of the Writing Fellowship and the idea of having another set of eyes on your paper and having another person to conference with before a paper is turned in or before a revision is turned in has some benefits for students, but we haven't systematically collected that information because our program is so new.
Is there any intention of trying to look at results in any way? I mean, I think it's great. I think, I think it's fabulous. The more people that, even just being comfortable enough sharing what you write with somebody is a big step. So, I think there's value, all kinds of values in this from the get-go. I'm just wondering whether
Yeah,
we're
so
seeing
right now, the metric
anything concrete.
that I'm looking for is how many teachers are willingly using it, how many students are willingly using it. That would be my base, that's what I'm interested in collecting, are people seeking to use the program. Then we'll take a look at the quality of the increase.
Thank you for the presentation. I guess my first question, though, this is very obviously high school based. Writing clearly begins before high school. Maybe peer wouldn't work in the middle school, but is there some thought of doing something maybe down the next grade level below, or was that too early for this conversation?
So I think there's always thoughts on ways that we can build writers throughout their K-12 experience. I think something in the middle school would need to look very different than something at the high school. But based on some of the work that we're doing now with the Writing Fellowship at the high school, a group that meets monthly with me is the English leadership team. So it's the department chairs at the high school and middle school who meet collaboratively, and we share work that is happening at both of those levels. So the Writing Fellowship has been a part of those conversations.
Thank you again for the presentation. We had an extensive and robust conversation in the curriculum committee meeting last week. I wanted to ask about how we're encouraging and incenting students to utilize the Writing Center in class or outside of class. What does that look like in terms of building that culture that we know is so valuable?
Perfect. That's a wonderful question. I think that invitation to come to the Writing Center and that way of incentivizing the Writing Center is happening on two levels. One, it's happening on the level of peer-to-peer conversation, students saying to each other, I can either sit at home and wrestle through this challenging idea myself, or I can wrestle through an idea with someone else who maybe took the class before, or who was once stuck and then got themselves unstuck. So I think peer word of mouth is a really effective and impactful tool. I also think that conversations with teachers, both English and social studies especially, who are inviting the fellows into their lunch and learn and telling teachers or telling students, if you're interested in a revision opportunity, then it would be worthwhile for you to talk to a fellow in a conference before you start your next revision. Or it is worthwhile for you to think about one question that you would like to seek the guidance of a writing fellow before you begin working on your next draft. So there are those two levels of creating incentives for students to engage in the fellowship.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, this is not really a question, but I think the seed has been planted. When I think of a fellow, I think of someone special who is designated to do a specific task, which these are, but as they go into higher education, they were a fellow in high school. So this gives them really, a vision that they can be a fellow in college or in graduate school. So the seed that is being planted is wonderful, and thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your support.
All right, any more questions? All right, well, thank you very much for the presentation. We really appreciate it. So,
Thank you.
We have one other presentation. Kimberly Frazier is going to go over the status of the comprehensive special education.
Good evening. This evening's presentation is an overview of the Special Education Comprehensive Plan, and then next month, when I meet with you again, will be a much more thorough look together at the plan that we'll be asking the board to approve. The Special Education Comprehensive Plan is an action plan that really looks at and ensures that the district has a commitment, which we do, to ensuring the highest quality education for our students with disabilities. It's on a 3-year cycle, so we're looking at developing a plan that will begin July 1 of this year and take us through 2021. There was a year pause. The plan and the comprehensive plan, if you may recall, was due last year. The state gave a pause on that for ESSA to be further developed. And so now we're back in the process this year. The plan itself really does describe what our special education programs and services are within the district and what we're able to offer to our students. Another aspect of the plan is the incorporation of anything that the state indicated was a corrective action when we went through our cyclical monitoring. If you recall, we did our cyclical monitoring in the 15-16 school year. The district performed very well in the cyclical monitoring. There was only one area of corrective action, and if you recall, it was a corrective action by a very slim number. The corrective action was for least restrictive environment. And least restrictive environment is ensuring that students have access to the general education setting with their non-disabled peers to the greatest extent possible. And in looking at least restrictive, that looks at the number of students who are placed in out-of-district placement. The state ideally likes to see that percent at 3.3% of the population being placed in out-of-district placements. And at the time of our cyclical monitoring, we were at 3.6%. So we're talking such a small difference in what the state was looking for. Even at the time of that cyclical monitor, we were already making aggressive steps, as we continue to do, in terms of offering a full continuum of services and further refining our programs so that we can ensure that students are included to the greatest degree possible. This is embedded within the overall district's comprehensive plan, so this is the initial part of it, and it's embedded within that overall plan. And we will be coming back to you with the full comprehensive plan as that process is also underway and will be presented more formally to you in the fall. The plan itself includes different components, and I'm just going to give a high-level overview so you know what to expect next month when I come and share more specifics. But these are just some of the things that the plan identifies within the written portion. We look at the identification method, which is how are students identified as requiring special education services. We look at enrollment numbers. We look at non-resident students oversight, so that addresses within the district any residential placements within the districts, any group homes within the district, and also what do we do for our students who are residing in residential placements. We also look at what we do for our incarcerated students and how does the district continue to provide support for those students even though they're incarcerated. There is a large section on least restrictive environment where we do talk about our continuum of services, the training that we provide to staff, and the steps that we take to ensure that students have access. Behavioral support services are also an important component of the plan where we talk about what supports and services are in place. We also have to describe what we do for students who may have intensive needs or who have highly specialized needs and may be difficult to find programming for. And then the part that I'm actually the most excited to be able to share with you next month are the strengths and highlights. And this is really where we look at what are some areas within the district that are of particular strength and worth highlighting. There has been a strong commitment within the district to special education, and I would say that that goes across all of our different stakeholders. And really in that strengths and highlights section, you can really see the work that's been done and the great programming that's made available K to 12. There's also an assurances section, which are statements that the state wants us to confirm, statements such as child find, our commitment to least restrictive environment. There's a facilities overview. This actually provides a list of all of the out-of-district programs that we utilize for our students who require a higher level of support than we can provide within the district. So there's a list of all the different schools that we utilize, the types of supports that are provided in those schools, and the number of students currently that are in those out-of-district placements. The special education program profile gives you a snapshot of all of our special education teachers and their caseloads and what type of support they're providing. There's a section on special education support services. So these are other supports aside from our teaching staff. This would include our counselors, our psychologists, our social workers, administration, listed so you can see the type of support that's offered. We list our contracted services, so this is where we can see what type of contracted support we utilize aside from the intermediate unit. So within ours, occupational therapists, our physical therapist, some literacy support is listed in the contracted services section. And then another part that I'm excited to share with you when we come back together is the personnel development. I think this is really at the heart of the plan. This is about what training and what support are we providing to all of our staff so we can continue to ensure that we're improving the programs that we offer, that our staff are ready and able to work with our students with disabilities. The state does indicate what areas you have to highlight. So there's 5 areas that we're going to talk about. They include autism, behavioral support, transition, reading, and paraprofessionals training. So those are areas that we'll highlight together. The process started with a drafting of the plan with review and input from a core planning committee that was a smaller committee that had various stakeholders, special education teachers, administration from district level, regular education teacher, and some parents. The drafting of the plan, then the plan becomes public for public review and comment. So I hope you've seen the communication push. It is posted in multiple places on our website. We are also aware that a lot of our families rely on communication from our HSAs, and so we are doing a blast through HSA's weekly newsletters that they send. We also sent out an all-community email, really hoping that people will take the opportunity to read through, even if only in part. It's a 97-page document. But even if people only read in part, we do want to hear comments and suggestions on the plan. Community members can submit comments directly through the website. There's a link that they can go to, so it's an easy way to quickly share feedback, and their supplying of their name and their contact information is optional, so people could do it anonymously as well. I also am offering an opportunity for the public to come in if they prefer an in-person conversation. On March 22nd at 7 o'clock here at District Office, we're offering an in-person feedback session for anyone who wants to come and speak personally about the plan or hear a little more about it and engage in dialogue. So I encourage people to come out to that as well. And we've also provided hard copies of the plan with printout forms for feedback in each of our buildings in the event that people prefer not to do it via technology, but they prefer to do it in person with hard copies. Then we'll come back and do a formal presentation to you, Curriculum Committee of the Board and the Education Committee here, and request formal approval in April. The plan is required to be submitted to PDE by May 1st, so we're right in line with that process. Okay, thank you.
I just want to really commend the department for making so many public and community outreaches. I think that's a good thing.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We look forward to the final presentation and product. Are there any questions at this time?
Could you, I may not have heard it, but just could you explain the acronym FAPE?
Yes. So FAPE stands for Free and Appropriate Public Education. So we are required to ensure that we're offering an educational program for each child that is appropriate and based on their individualized needs, and that we're required to provide that at no expense to our families.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, and it seems like you have a lot of outreach to try to get the information out there. And I may have missed it, but did you reach out to either the Committee for Special Education, that group, or the ISC to present in either of those places as well?
Yeah, working collaboratively, and we have a representative from CSE on the committee.
Great, thank you.
So I was remembering that the last time that we did this, I think, was at the same time as the strategic planning process.
Yes.
I can't believe it's been
It's
3 years already, but, and I know at that time there was all kinds of conversation about, this is obviously a, sort of state mandated in the way in which it's set up. There's questions you have to answer in very particular ways. But even at that time, we were talking a little bit about sort of thinking through special education in light of the strategic plan. And I do realize that that's not sort of technically part of this, but I'm wondering if there's anything you want to say about that, or if that's something you want to consider, even just thinking about for us, not necessarily for what we have to mandate,
Right.
What is mandatory.
My intent when I come back to you when we're looking in depth at the plan is to be able to identify for you and show you how it does link to our strategic plan, and also where we, similarly to what we do with the strategic plan, is we go beyond what compliance requires. And so I'll be able to identify for you within that ways that it connects with our different pathways.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, as we said at the beginning of the meeting, our last presentation is going to be postponed until our next meeting due to concerns about the weather, I think, is where we're at. So So we'll look forward to that, hearing that. So at this time, what I'd like to do is if anybody would like to speak on any issue, agenda item or not, to please come forward. Now is the time, if anyone's, no? Okay. All right. Well, then, I will just say that the next meetings coming up are, there's a Finance Committee meeting, which is going to review the budget around operations at 8:30 a.m. on March 14th, and a Facilities and Purchasing Committee meeting Thursday, March 15th at 8:30 a.m., again, both in this room. And with that, we're adjourned, and everybody have a safe trip home.